On the night of 7th-8th March 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 prepared for a routine overnight flight from Kuala Lumpur International Airport, KLIA, to Beijing Capital International Airport. The scheduled departure was 0035 MYT. The aircraft, a Boeing 777-200ER, registered 9M-MRO, actually took off at 0041 MYT with 227 passengers and 12 crew, 239 people in total. The flight climbed to cruising altitude, flight level 350, on a clear early morning. Routine communications passed between the cockpit and Malaysian air traffic control. At 0107 MYT, the aircraft sent its last complete ACARS automated message. At 0119 MYT, the crew acknowledged handover to Ho Chi Minh Air Traffic Control with the now famous final radio transmission, "Good night." Less than 2 minutes later, at 0121 MYT, the aircraft's secondary transponder stopped being detected by civilian radar. What followed was confusion. Air traffic control logs, company procedures, and later inquiries show a window of uncertainty. Initial reports stated contact was lost at 0240 MYT, but that reflected the time Malaysia Airlines had been notified. The critical facts are sharper. Takeoff 0041 MYT. Last ACARS 0107 MYT. Last verbal contact 0119 MYT. And the civilian radar target gone by 0121 MYT. No distress call, no emergency squawk, simply silence. At first glance, the flight looked routine. Within hours, it would become one of modern aviation's most baffling mysteries, an airliner that departed with 239 souls only to vanish from conventional surveillance and begin a chain of international searches and investigations that would last years. Once the aircraft failed to appear as scheduled in Beijing, an escalating chain reaction began. Malaysia Airlines notified authorities. International media rapidly amplified the story. Within hours, military and civilian radar data were revisited and satellite operators were contacted. Naval vessels, Coast Guard units, and aircraft from Malaysia, Vietnam, and other neighboring nations were mobilized. Initial search efforts concentrated in the South China Sea, following the published flight track to waypoint Igari. But within the first day, discrepancies in radar data emerged. Military radar suggested that MH370 had turned west after the last known civilian radar contact, crossing the Malay Peninsula and heading into the Strait of Malacca and beyond. Those military returns were crucial. They established that the aircraft had deviated from its filed flight plan. Over the next 48 hours, the search radius ballooned from working the South China Sea to covering thousands of nautical miles. The multinational response included ships, aircraft, and satellite imagery analysts. Governments, families, and the public awaited any sign of wreckage or survivors. The absence of debris in the early intensive surface search deepened the mystery. The early days were also marked by information friction, contradicting statements, delayed confirmations, and evolving timelines. That confusion would later be examined in official inquiries. Still, the operational reality was brutally clear. An airliner had gone missing in a part of the world where search logistics were difficult and the ocean vast.
Military radar returns over the Malay Peninsula and the Andaman Sea revealed a flight path inconsistent with the filed plan. These radar plots, kept and later released to investigators, recorded a westward turn, a transit across the Malay Peninsula, and continued flight over the Andaman Sea long after MH370 disappeared from civilian secondary radar. But tracking was incomplete. Civilian secondary radar depends on the aircraft's transponder. Once that stopped, standard civilian radar could not see the aircraft. The only persistent, reconstructible signals came from satellite communications. Inmarsat, the satellite operator, later provided metadata, the so-called handshakes, between the aircraft's satellite data link and a satellite in geostationary orbit. Although these handshakes contained no voice, they left timing and distance metadata that investigators used to compute arcs of possible locations. Analysts transformed those arc markers into a narrowing search zone across the southern Indian Ocean, a vast area where the plane might have flown until fuel exhaustion. Importantly, that satellite data indicated the aircraft remained airborne for several hours after contact was lost, suggesting a prolonged final phase rather than an immediate catastrophic event over the South China Sea. These combined radar and satellite traces became the backbone of the international search strategy. They turned a story of an instantaneous disappearance into a long, cold trail across the planet's most remote oceanic regions.
Armed with Inmarsat arcs and the Mimicry radar returns, investigators focused search efforts progressively farther into the southern Indian Ocean. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau, ATSB, led the underwater search coordination, conducting extensive surface and subsurface sweeps covering tens of thousands of square kilometers. Search teams deployed ships, aircraft, side-scan sonar, and autonomous underwater vehicles. They mapped seabed topography in unprecedented detail. The operation became one of the most complex and costly searches in aviation history. The surface search, the acoustic hydrophone monitoring, and ultimately the deep-sea sonar mapping consumed years and millions of dollars. Despite exhaustive effort, the primary wreckage, the fuselage, the flight recorders, the main sections of the airplane remained undiscovered. The ocean, with its deep trenches and strong currents, conspired against a precise find. Drift modeling became critical. Oceanographers and CSIRO researchers simulated how debris could move from a hypothetical crash site to the shorelines where fragments later appeared. In parallel, private companies volunteered or were contracted for further searches. In 2018, Ocean Infinity conducted a large, targeted search using advanced autonomous vessels, but concluded without locating the main wreckage. The practical reality set in. The aircraft, if in the deep ocean, lay on terrain so complex and extensive that locating it was extraordinarily difficult.
The first confirmed physical evidence emerged in July 2015. A flaperon washed ashore on Reunion Island in the western Indian Ocean. Forensic examination, including serial numbers and metallurgical analysis, confirmed the part belonged to MH370. Over the following months and years, a handful of other fragments, pieces of interior cabin panels, a portion of a life vest pouch, a section of an engine cowling, were found on beaches from Mozambique to Madagascar and on Reunion. Their provenance was investigated by authorities in multiple countries. Each fragment offered investigators a data point. Corrosion patterns, marine growth, painting layers, and fastener types provided clues about how long the parts had spent in salt water and possibly where they had originated. Scientific drift modeling tried to connect the dots, mapping likely debris paths from the southern Indian Ocean crash hypotheses to the African coastline. Yet the fragments also raised questions. Some experts argued that certain pieces' condition did not fully match the most widely accepted crash location, and doubts remained about precisely reconstructing a single impact site on the basis of these sporadic finds. Nonetheless, the flaperon was the first concrete confirmation that at least some wreckage from MH370 had reached land, a grim, partial closure for bereaved families, and a new focus for investigators. The presence of debris in geographically distant places underscored the power of ocean currents and the long timelines involved. A single washed-ashore part could be months or more than a year adrift before reaching a beach, complicating efforts to use shoreline finds to pinpoint a final resting place. As physical evidence accumulated in fragmented form, speculative energy multiplied. Investigators and independent analysts assembled hypotheses that ranged from technically plausible to conspiratorial. Leading technical explanations included a sudden catastrophic failure, explosion or fire, that disabled communications, but not necessarily caused immediate disintegration, progressive incapacitation due to rapid decompression leading to hypoxia of everyone on board while the aircraft continued on autopilot until fuel exhaustion, or in-flight events that incapacitated crew and left the aircraft in a programmed flight path. On the other hand, theories of deliberate action focused heavily on human agency. Attention centered on Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah. Investigators discovered that his home flight simulator contained a simulated flight path similar to the one reconstructed for MH370. While proponents argued this suggested pre-planning, others countered that simulator files are common among experienced pilots and do not prove intent. The Malaysian final report did not apportion blame conclusively. Cyber intrusion theories asked if avionics or satellite data links could be hacked. Though modern aircraft are increasingly networked, experts caution that such a remote takeover remains technologically challenging and would likely leave forensic traces. More controversial claims suggested military involvement, accidental shoot-down, capture, or concealment, but no unambiguous evidence has corroborated such scenarios. The presence of certain high-value passengers on board, engineers and specialists, fueled speculation about motives. However, official inquiries found no conclusive link. What stands out is not simply the variety of theories, but the way the lack of central evidence turned absence into narrative. Any small anomaly could be woven into a much larger story. For investigators, the task remained to weigh plausibility by evidence rather than by narrative appeal.
Beyond technical debates and modeling lies the human cost. Families of the 239 people on board endured months and years of uncertainty, grief, and advocacy. Many organized searches, lobbied governments for continued efforts, and sought answers in open forums and hearings. The ambiguity produced an abiding psychological strain. No confirmed loss, no wreckage located for closure, no recovered remains for burial. Psychologists call this ambiguous loss, a form of grief without closure that complicates mourning and legal status. Families created memorials, established foundations, and became persistent public voices demanding accountability and transparency. The international community also reevaluated protocols for tracking aircraft and for communicating with families in crises. The MH370 tragedy catalyzed calls for better real-time tracking of commercial flights, more frequent satellite handshakes, and improved international cooperation in search response. Concrete changes in policy and technology that aim to reduce the odds of a repeat disappearance. Ultimately, the story of MH370 is not only a technical case study, it is a human tragedy that reshaped aviation safety priorities and left an enduring imprint on the lives of those who lost loved ones.
Years after the disappearance, MH370 continues to shape aviation, policy, and public imagination. Official reports, including the Malaysian Safety Investigation, published 2018, and analyses by the ATSB, delivered detailed chronologies, technical findings, and recommendations, but no single definitive cause. The Malaysian report concluded that the aircraft's final location could not be determined and recommended further investigation. The ATSB and other bodies provided probabilistic search areas but acknowledged uncertainty. The loss spurred technological and regulatory changes. Inmarsat and the industry increased the capabilities for satellite data use and recommended more frequent communications. ICAO and national regulators accelerated work on better tracking and locating transmitters. Private firms refined underwater search techniques, and companies explored new ways of guaranteeing real-time flight data retention. Yet for the families and the world, questions remain. Why was the aircraft diverted? Who, if anyone, deliberately caused it? Where are the flight recorders? Will the main wreckage ever be found? The open answers ensure MH370 remains an enigma. As storytellers and investigators, we must hold two commitments: rigorous reliance on evidence and compassionate acknowledgement of the human toll. MH370 teaches a difficult lesson. In a connected, instrumented age, mysteries still appear, and when they do, they test both our technology and our humanity. If you want to help keep the search for truth alive, subscribe and follow. History depends on attention, and sometimes the smallest detail changes everything.